Next week, we'll be discussing Masculin Féminin. Tom, how was your watch?
Great. I really like this movie. I like Godard a lot. And I probably watch this movie fewer times than other Godard films. And I wanted to bring this forward instead of something maybe a little more traditional or a little more familiar like Breathless or Weekend, just because I think it's very odd movie. A lot of it I really like. I think it's really on theme for the type of things Godard likes to explore. And I think there's a lot in this movie I don't understand and would be interested in exploring. I also think it fits our block. So our block is that era or that time period, and we're looking at movies that sort of exemplify a time period. And I think one thing this movie does extremely well and extremely clearly is capture 1960s France, especially that kind of youthful energy that was going on in 1960s France, which an extraordinary percentage of the population was like under 25. It was like 50% of the French population at this time was under 25. So it was just this very youth-centered culture that goes on. And what's wonderful about this movie, it was filmed in 1965. It comes out in 66, but like that spirit of 68 that everybody's familiar with that went on in France, it's clearly here. So you could see kind of like this almost like archaeological find of what's eventually going to bubble up in 1968 with the protests in that year. And on top of that, I just love watching Leo, Jean-Pierre Leo. I like just like looking at his face and seeing how he responds to things. Um, I think I get so much pleasure out of just watching that actor do things on screen. It's always a pleasure when he pops up in things. Kevin, how was your watch?
Yeah, it was really good. I ended up finding it on YouTube of all places. I'm sure that's uh, a crime according to active cinema goers, but or cinemaphiles, I suppose. But I enjoyed it all the same. I did enjoy the experience of watching the movie. I'm not particularly familiar with this setting, this time and place. So I did try to read up on it a little bit. And Tom, just like you mentioned, I found it to be after I knew what was going to happen after this movie was made, it was sort of retroactively prescient, if that makes sense. And I thought that part was really cool. Again, I'm not at all familiar with mid '60s France, but it was an interesting sort of snapshot into a culture and a time that I was not familiar with. So I found it really interesting on that level. Certainly, some of the gender play in there I thought was like, oh, I guess that's what it was like to try to date somebody in '60s France. That's interesting. Um, but yeah, all that was cool. And yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about it because there's a lot I don't get, and that should make for some pretty interesting conversation. KJ, what'd you think?
Wait. What happened in '68? What is I? I am coming at this completely blind. I watched this movie. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't realize we were on the eve of something. Tom, please let me know and anybody planning on watching this movie to have a hope. What happened in '68?
Well, this movie was made before that, but in 1968, you had a basically a student revolution. The
Like
students need,
riots?
oh, yeah, protests, riots,
Okay.
setting cars on fire.
Oh.
It started in May in the University of Sorbonne, and you had um, students kind of rebelling against, low wage. The Vietnam War was a big spark there, and eventually different unions joined in, and so you had something like a
Okay,
million
okay, okay.
people
So, the audience,
protest.
my recommendation is to treat this movie like another French movie that we watched, although it wasn't a French movie. Marie Antoinette. Treat this movie like that. Takes place in France,
What?
building up to something, but you don't actually get to the thing it's building up to. Enjoy. How about you, Nick?
I wasn't sure if I just wasn't giving this movie a fair shake or if it really wasn't grabbing me. And as I continued, I realized it was the latter. It just didn't call to me. I was waiting for it to end pretty much. And that's the story there. While preparing for this film, we had a text chain going. And I thought it was interesting that someone brought up Ingmar Bergman's review of this film. A classic case of Godard, mind-numbingly boring. I approve this message. Masculin Féminin is available on HBO Max and Criterion at the time of this recording.